Welcome to another exciting and business-orientated episode of the Professional Plumber Podcast. My name is Willem. I'll be your host, and in this specific episode, we'll be discussing the importance of planning ahead for your business. Now, joining me for this conversation is Mr. Brendan Reynolds, the Executive Director of IOPSA. Brendan, a warm welcome to you as well.
Thanks, Willem. Great to be here.
All right, so Brendan, we're talking about the importance of planning ahead for your business. And I got two quotes that I want to share with our listeners and our viewers. That Winston Churchill once said that he who fails to plan is planning to fail. And then in the same breath, Dwight Eisenhower, who was one of the previous presidents of America, he said these words. He said, "Plans are nothing, but planning is everything." And those are quite impactful statements made. So, Brendan, the fact is that we are at the beginning of a new year, and there's much to look forward to. You know, we're past the whole COVID thing, and we've done many episodes and conversations about COVID thing, but this is a new year, a new beginning, and there can be much said about planning and planning ahead for our businesses, for ourselves, our personal lives, whatever the case may be. But before you and I delve into all of those details, I'd like for us to just cross over to some quick ad breaks. And to our viewers and our listeners, don't go away. We'll be right back right after this. This Valentine's, what could be more romantic than listening to plumbing-related podcasts in a hot tub? TMP Magazine Podcasts, bringing you interesting and informative conversations about your trade and industry. TMP Magazine Podcasts. Staying informed and being empowered could never be more romanticized, all pun intended. Find our podcasts on TMP Magazine on App Plumber. We know you'll love the content. Welcome back. You are still tuned into an episode of the Professional Plumber Podcast. Now, this specific episode is business orientated, and in this episode, we are talking about the importance of planning ahead. I have with me, joining me for this conversation, Mr. Brendan Reynolds. I've already mentioned to you that he is the Executive Director of IOPSA, but Brendan's got a lot more, experience in just that. So, Brendan, just a quick reminder to our viewers and our listeners of who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Willem, and great to be here. Yeah, so I've been in the plumbing industry for about 30 odd years, and I've fulfilled various roles in the industry, from very lowly beginnings to quite senior management in large businesses, with Plumlink, for example, and I've run my own business together with my wife, and had various roles within the industry and at quite senior level. So yeah, planning is something that is actually very close to my heart, and something that is often missing, particularly with small businesses. You know, they don't think about planning, and they don't see the value in planning ahead. And when we talk about planning ahead, we're not talking about next month or next year, but well into the future, and the longevity of the business. So something very close to my heart, and something that I'm quite passionate about.
Close to your heart, passionate about. You mentioned the word value, the value of planning ahead. I'd say, if I look at those two quotes that I read just when we started this episode off, Winston Churchill, who said, "He who plans to fail is planning to, or he who fails to plan is planning to fail." And then Dwight Eisenhower, who said, plans are nothing, but planning is everything. So from those, I would derive that, it may be valuable, but it is quite important. It is an important factor to business. And by the sounds of it, it sounds as if you would agree with it. And I'd like to hear, if you agree with it, why?
I think first and foremost, Willem, the planning, the act of sitting down in a quiet space and looking at your business and trying to figure out what the future holds and where you're going to go to and how you're going to get there, focuses the mind. And once you've focused your mind, then many things become achievable that may have seemed impossible previously. You know, people think that planning is this big difficult thing, but we do it quite often in our personal lives. And I always use this example. If you're taking a trip, if you're going on holiday, let's say, for example, you're going down to the coast for a holiday. Maybe you've just come back from a nice December break. But when you go on holiday, what do? You plan. Where am I going to go? When am I going to go? Where am I going to stay? How long is it going to take me to get there? Where am I going to fill up fuel, or what will I do if my vehicle breaks down, or all these types. How much is it going to cost me? How long am I going for? All these type of things we do naturally when we're doing something like going on holiday. But very often people in their careers and business owners don't do this, and because they don't see the value in it, and they don't understand how important it is. And so if you aim for nothing, you'll achieve it every time. But if you've got a goal in mind, you've got to figure out and you've got to think for yourself, how am I going to get there? And the second quote that you brought in about planning is probably for me the more important aspect. So if I use the analogy again about going on a holiday, you get the family and the kids in the car and you're all packed and off you go, and a couple of kilometers down the road you get a flat tire. Do you pack it in and stay where you are, or do you make a plan?
Yeah.
And it's exactly the same thing. It's a lovely analogy that I like to use, and it's exactly the same thing. Problems are going to occur along the way. So if you've decided that in 5 years' time you want your business to reach a particular size, or you want to be active in a certain part of the market, or whatever it is that you've decided is the goal for your business in 5 years' time, somewhere along the line, I guarantee you, absolutely guarantee you, something's going to go wrong. And then that's where planning as an active, ongoing endeavor becomes so important, because that's the point where you're going to need to sit down and say, oh, hold on a second, we've got a flat tire, or something has gone wrong. And what do we do? How do we go about adjusting, finding a new path? Maybe you need to push out your goal a little bit. Maybe you said it was 5 years, and sure, now something has happened and it's got to be 6 years or 7 years. So be it. Occasionally, you might figure out that, look, that plan wasn't a great plan, and we need to completely rethink the plan.
Yeah.
But planning is not something it's not a once-off event. It's not like now in January you sit down and say, right, that's my plan for the year and for the next 5 years, and that's it. You stick it on a wall, and then you forget about it. It's a process and not an event. It's something that's ongoing, and you've got to review it. And how are we doing? Are we on target? Think again about my analogy of going on holiday. If you were driving, wherever you were driving for your holiday, you'd kind of have an idea that, after 2 hours of driving, I'll be close to this ultra city or something where I'm going to stop and take a break. And after 4 hours, I'm going to reach that point. And, it's the same thing in business. 3 months down the track, or 6 months down the track, or a year down the track, am I on track? Am I more or less where I thought I should be? Do I need to adjust? Do I need to do something different? That's the importance of ongoing planning.
And the fact is also, ongoing planning, we are living in changing times. It's ever changing. Change is inevitable. So we're going through change all the time. We look at COVID and the COVID pandemic and the effect that it had on business and the economy. We're looking at the war in the Ukraine that's currently going on, and the effect that that has on businesses and the economy. Again, that we're speaking of that, the analogy about the flat tire, and what you do then is that it's the same thing with that. If you have forecasting can prevent organizations from becoming a victim of circumstance, because you did your forecasting and you did your planning for those events. Some things are unforeseen and out of our control, but if we constantly keep planning in place and on track, it can prevent us from falling victim to circumstances. But at the same time, you also said, I like the analogy where you said, where am I going on holiday, for instance? We're using holiday and going on holiday as an example, but we are talking about businesses. Where am I going? What do I want to achieve with my business? Planning sets clear goals, and it sort of maps out your goals for your company. It gives clear direction. Where am I going? Where do I want to go? What do I want to achieve? How do I get there? Those kind of things. It sets clear goals and direction for companies and organizations. And it is also that even if businesses are already successful, they know that they can ask themselves that question, that could they achieve more? And if they think that they can, then the plans for achieving more needs to be put into place.
Yes, absolutely. So you've actually touched on quite a lot there, Willem. So just firstly to talk about the changing world. In my 30 odd years in this industry, I've never ever experienced the speed and the volume of change that is coming at us constantly at this time. It is, and it's not unique to the plumbing industry. Let me tell you, it's across the board. All industries are experiencing the same thing. And in challenging times, that is when planning becomes the most important thing. You set together your plan. What are we going to do? What do we want to achieve? How are we going to achieve it? How are we going to work on it? And the most important thing again is that constant monitoring and sort of a health check. Where are we? Are we okay? Are we doing okay? Do we need to adjust? Do we need to move? Has something new happened that we need to adapt to? So for me, when times are really tough, is when you really need to plan and you really need to find that quiet time. And this is not easy for particularly small businesses. Is you've got to make the time to sit quietly without distractions and disruptions. That's why January is actually a great time to do this before you get back to the big grind. And to plan and to figure out what are you going to do? How are you going to react to things? The second thing is that you touched on, which I think is also very crucial, is very often happens that businessmen become quite successful. So you may be a plumber or run a plumbing business, and you're really doing extremely well. The tendency there is to get into a comfort zone and to say, well, I've got this thing waxed and it's just going to keep going like a Boeing, and I can take my foot off the gas and I can relax, and I don't need to do all this planning and strategy, and I don't need to spend the amount of time on my business. That should be a huge danger zone for you, a huge flashing red light. The minute you feel comfortable, you're in trouble. And I've seen this time and time and time again in this industry. The minute you feel comfortable, you're in trouble. So what happens is you get into a nice groove. You've done all this hard work and you figured it all out, and you got into a place where it's all working beautifully. But what you forget about is that everybody else is chasing you and potentially overtaking you. And while you're relaxing, the next thing you know, you might wipe the proverbial out of your eye and discover that you've been left behind. And this happens so often. And that's why continuous planning is so important, because at the beginning of each year or quarter or whatever it is that you're going to do your planning, you set those goals for yourself, and it kind of pushes you to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
You've got to be keeping it, you've got to keep on thinking, what is next? What's next? What can I do next? Where can I get to next? Because there's some lighty sitting in a garage somewhere right now, figuring out something, some new technology or some new product or some new way of doing things. It's going to come up and it's going to completely disrupt everything that is happening in our industry. Guaranteed, it's happening right now. So if you just sit back and say, we're going to do it the way we've always done it, and we're not going to change it, we're not going to adapt, and we're not going to plan ahead, you're going to be left behind. Absolute fact. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you will be left behind.
You know, every one of us can become that industry disruptor. So Brendan, we need to go to a quick ad break. So for our viewers and our listeners, please don't go away. Have a look at the ad breaks. We'll be right back right after this.
Are you having questions about the Plumbing Industry Registration Board and the plumbing industry in South Africa? Well, then join us on the couch and in conversation with the industry experts to answer all your lingering questions about the plumbing industry. The PIRB remains committed to ensuring open and consistent communication within the plumbing industry. So, be part of the conversation. Send us your questions on email at communications@pirb.co.za or on WhatsApp on 079 833 6930. Become a part of the conversation today. Hashtag on the couch. Hashtag PIRB.
Welcome back to this business-orientated episode of the Professional Plumbing Podcast or Professional Plumber Podcast. Now, Brendan Reynolds and I are having a conversation about the importance of planning ahead. We are at the beginning of the new year, and I think that it's important for us to share with you a couple of tips and a couple of facts about planning and planning ahead for your businesses, which we believe will carry a lot of value to you. Brendan, so just before we went into the ad break, we were talking about why it is important to plan ahead. But I think our viewers and our listeners out there would like to hear a couple of tips or a couple of aspects and a couple of factors that they should take into consideration when they get to the actual planning.
Now, Willem, every business is unique, and every business owner is unique, and they think about things in different ways. So I like to go about planning quite simply. You can go and do a lot of research and you can find some really awesome ways of going about this. But I find them to be quite complicated, and I like to keep things quite simple. So I go through a process of just asking the questions. What, when, where, how, and who. And I use those 5 questions, and I sit down and I say, well, what is it that we want to achieve? Where do we want to end up? What is the ultimate goal? The short term, medium term, which is normally short term is kind of a year generally. What is what do we want to achieve for the year? Medium term is sort of 3 to 5 years. And the long term is generally 5 to 10 years looking ahead. And it's important to do all 3 of those, because remember, we're building a bit of a roadmap here to where we want to get to ultimately. So what is it that we want to achieve? And you can be as simple or as complex in terms of describing what it is that you want to achieve as you want. But the point is to put it down on paper, whatever that is. And sometimes these can be quite personal, you know. People can want to achieve different things for different reasons, but you decide what it is that you want to achieve. So if you want to say, I want to be the biggest plumbing company in Pietermaritzburg, well, that's a very simple goal. You could also then say, I want to be the leading supplier of a certain type of product, while at the same time offering the best service in the country and winning some awards or something like that. So then it becomes a bit more of a complicated, multifaceted kind of a goal. It doesn't matter. It's what do you want to achieve? That's all that matters. Not what I think is the right thing or what the industry thinks is the right thing or somebody else or your parents or your friends. It's about what you as a business owner want to achieve with your business.
Yeah, maybe something
Second thing, and this is a sorry, Willem.
No, it may be something like expanding your footprint. You know, you may be operating in a specific area and you would like to extend your business to other areas, meaning perhaps opening up a branch or something of your business in other areas so that you can expand your footprint. It can be something like that.
Yes, absolutely. So it could be almost anything, but it's what is important to you. Why did you start this business? It could be something like, I want to make X amount of profit, or I want to achieve X amount of turnover, or it could be, it really could be anything that you want to achieve, because you, the business owner, why did you start this business? Why? And what do you want to do with it? It could be that you want to create a sustainable business that can create employment for your children in the future, that your children can take up. It really doesn't matter. Your what is your what. And it's what's important to you and what you want to achieve. Sometimes those things can be a bit strange and a bit out there, but it doesn't matter. It's what's important to you. The next thing, and this is a critical thing, and this often gets left out, is the when. And it's really important to sit down and think about it and to be realistic. There's certain goals that you physically cannot achieve in a year or in 3 months. You know, people start a new business and say, we'll be profitable in 3 months. It's you got to be kind of realistic. You know, you can't be completely pie in the sky here. You know, you got there's real life out there also. So sit down and think about it realistically and set yourself a target, and don't set yourself up for failure. If there's something that realistically you can achieve in 2 or 3 years' time, set your time frame as 3 years. Don't set it as 1 year, because then you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to achieve that goal in that period of time. So be realistic, be honest, and be a little bit conservative. You know, it's great when you say, I'm going to achieve this in 3 years' time, and then a year later you knock the lights out of it. That feels great, but the other way around doesn't feel so great, you know. So be kind to yourself. Next up, third is the where. It sounds a bit weird. Where? Well, you spoke about location. You spoke about maybe increasing your footprint. But nowadays, we also talk about whether things are physical or virtual.
Yeah.
You know, so the where has changed a lot over the years. You may currently have a small little business in the township, and you might want to move into the suburbs or the city. You may be based in a rural area, and your goal is to get your business into a bigger market in the city. But you also may have a brick and mortar business right now that you want to move into the cloud or into sort of a web kind of a space. And that's also an important question to ask. And I think one that you need to ask is where and what sort of locations and how we're going to go about this from a physical point of view, especially in the plumbing industry. Fourth one is the how, and this is where you need to spend some time. So up until now, we've I would say if I was doing this, I would have spent maybe an hour or two of my time. But the next portion is the how. And this you need to really, this is the crux, this is the engine room.
It's almost that,
how are you going to achieve?
What is required to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve? It's that how.
Exactly.
How do I do this? How do I get there? How do I do it?
Yes, absolutely. And it's bigger than the business, because you might need to purchase some equipment. You might need to build an office. You might need to buy an office. You might need a storeroom. You might need, so there's all these physical things that you need to take into consideration in your how. But then you need to start looking at, do I have the skills, and do my staff have the skills?
Exactly.
This is an element that often gets left behind. It's great. We're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're gonna go overseas, and we're going to get this new technology, and we're going to bring it in, and we're going to catch the market napping, and we're going to be the pioneers in this new technology in South Africa. But the staff have no skills in order to do it.
Yeah.
Do you, as the business owner, have the necessary business acumen and skills to drive this business in the direction and the goal where you want it to be? Or do you need to invest in yourself and grow yourself and your knowledge and your business acumen to be able to run this business effectively? Or do you need to go out there and hire people that have got that skill that maybe you're lacking in your team? So these are a lot of the questions you need to ask. And then very importantly, as you go through this how, and you've got to be very real. You got to be very real. You know, if you need to buy a piece of yellow machinery, you know, a big earthworking, maybe a back actor or a bulldozer or something like that, well, where's the money going to come from?
Exactly.
So you've got to be real with yourself. Once you set down this kind of physical, the hardcore stuff that I need to do to get to my goal, do I have the skills to do that? Do my people have the skills? What do I need to do in terms of that? And then you can't do this without thinking about the buckets. You've got to say to yourself, is my cash flow going to allow it? Am I going to need to take loans? Am I going to need to find a financier, that can invest some money in this? How am I going to do this? You know, you don't want to write a fairy tale story here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no knight going to ride in on a great big white horse and come and save the day. That doesn't happen in business. Either you make it happen or it doesn't happen. It's as simple as that. So the how would take some time. You know, I would probably estimate, you know, you're going to spend 4 or 5 hours really, and this is where you've got to get into detail. You've really got to think about it, and almost as a business owner, run through the day-to-day stuff that you would need to do. You know, who's going to open the store in the morning, or the business in the morning? How are we going to plan our days? What equipment are we going to be needing to be using? What stock are we going to need? What people are we going to need? What are we going to do? How are we going to find the money to grow the way we want to grow? You know, and that's really important.
Brendan, the fact is that every aspect we look at, we can look at the what, where, when, how, and who. You know, I had it written down here on my notes. I can read to you. It was, what is it that you want to achieve? What is the current status of your business? And then also, what is required? That is the how part. What is required to achieve the things that you want to achieve? But regardless of all of these aspects and these factors that we have to take into consideration when we are doing our planning, all of them depend on another factor. Because if you're saying that you want to if one of your things that you want to achieve, the what part of your planning is that, all right, I want to expand the services that I offer. So then you're saying, all right, so if you want to now add solar installation to your business as an additional service to expand your services, then it becomes to write, okay, so how am I going to do that? Then it also is affected by who's going to do that. You know, so the what and the what is one thing to consider, but then who's going to do that and how they're going to do that? Do they have the right equipment? Do they have the right training? So all of these aspects and factors are so, impacted by each other. They are so dependent on each other. You cannot leave one of these factors out.
Absolutely. And you touch on the most important factor in this whole discussion is the who. That is the most important. Running any business, whether it's running IOPSA or whether it's running a plumbing business, whether it's running a big corporate, it essentially comes down to managing the people. And, we hear this thing, people say, the staff or the people are our most important asset. Very few companies actually live that, but it is the truth. Because unless you're in a completely digital kind of environment where maybe things might be a little bit different, or you're a person that just wants to be yourself in a van with no staff, that might be a bit different. But other than that, you've got to have staff, and figuring out who the right people are to do certain things and who's best suited, and finding the absolute best talent that you can out there, and not just settling for the cheapest, the person that will work for the cheapest rate. That's a critical factor in success. Mm. You cannot succeed without good people. So that also needs to take a bit of time, is to think about who do we need in order to achieve these goals that we've set for us. And it could be that you have the right person, maybe not with completely the right skills, and then how are you going to invest in that person, or how are you going to get that person to up their level of skill to be able to achieve what you're trying to achieve, or alternatively, how are you going to find people with those skills that you need in order to take you forward. It's the who part of this, it is so critical. Again, it's one of those things that is that can take your legs out from underneath. You can have the best plans, you can have all the money put in place, you can have the everything set out beautifully, and then you've got terrible staff that are poorly managed and don't have the skills, and wow, you're going to fail spectacularly. So spend some time on that one too.
Brendan, I think that
one thing that I just want to add, Willem, is to build in a factor of resiliency, and to start developing a culture of resiliency. How are you going to bounce back from your setbacks or from things that go wrong? Because absolutely guaranteed, somewhere along your journey, something is going to go wrong, and that's really important to think about that, and think about how you if you put together a very rigid structure and a very rigid plan that doesn't have room to wiggle and to move, it becomes a little bit difficult when you have a big setback. So think about, if there's a big setback, how are we going to react? How are we going to pivot? How are we going to change? How are we going to move? God forbid there's another COVID type event, but potentially there could be another COVID type event.
We don't know.
And you've got to be able to, adapt.
Wow. We don't want to fall victim to circumstances again. But listen, Brendan, I think that there are a couple of tips that we can still give to the viewers and the listeners out there when it comes to the specific planning. Let's just take another quick ad break. So to our viewers and our listeners, please don't go away. Do stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back. You're still tuned into a business-orientated episode of the Professional Plumber with myself and Mr. Brendan Reynolds of IOPSA, and we're talking about the importance of planning ahead in our business. Just before we went into the ad break, we've been discussing why planning ahead and planning is so important to our businesses. We have also discussed what factors should be taken or what aspects should be taken into consideration when we are doing our planning. And we'll be looking now at things like, just giving you a couple of tips of how to go about in your planning. Brendan, there can be a couple of things that people can look at when they're going into, they know what factors they have to consider for their planning. But there are things like that we can give them tips, like I've got one here that says create an effective business plan. And now you spoke about don't just look at your 12-month plan. You spoke about look at your long-term things. So we often hear those words, and especially when we are being interviewed for a job, people can ask us, it's a question that often gets popped up, what is your 5-year plan? What is your plan ahead? So one of the tips that I would give from my side, when people are actually now putting their plans together and doing the planning, is to put together an effective business plan, your 5-year vision and your 10-year vision and long-term for that matter, in addition to your short-term, your 12-month plan.
So just to touch on the business plan, Willem, it's such a critical thing that's often overlooked. Is that 5 or 10-year vision of where you want to be. You could put that together in a very short space of time, but then breaking it down into little sections. Firstly, and most importantly, your 1-year plan, because that's what steps, what am I going to do this year to get to my 5-year or 10-year vision? And so that makes it a little bit more manageable for you to plan out your year and give you a guide as to where you want to go. But even then, you should be breaking it down even further to a quarterly thing. And this, it might sound like we're telling you to do a huge amount of it. It's not really, You've done the big work in your business plan. And this is just the how-to. What am I going to do this year? And what am I going to do this quarter? So break it down a little bit, even down to a kind of a daily basis. Every
Daily,
morning,
weekly.
This kind of happens naturally in businesses. Most businesses, early in the morning, there's a little bit of a planning. What are we doing today? Who's going where? Which jobs have we got? What's important? Maybe a bucket is broken down or something like that. And so you tend to have these little quick team meetings. But if you sit with that team and while you're doing that, talk about achieving your goals. Why are we doing this? What are we doing? How are we going about it? That's all great. But remember, guys, we're trying to achieve this. And that reminder that this is our plan, this is what we're trying to achieve. And so that everything that everybody does every day and every month and every quarter and every year is kind of guiding towards that goal that you want to. Everybody's going in the same direction.
We always hear that analogy. Sorry, I just have to bring this in, Brendan. We always hear that analogy where the question is asked, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is bit by bit. So you've got your long-term goals. You know what you want to achieve with your business one day, 20 years from now. You've got this vision about your business. And then you break it down into smaller chunks. You eat that elephant bit by bit, day by day, week by week, month by quarter, and year by year, until you get eventually to it. Make sure that these short planning then contributes towards achieving that bigger goal, that bigger vision.
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be some big fancy thing. It doesn't have to be some, formal meeting every morning. Everyone's got to sit down and fill in things. And It doesn't need to be that. You're doing it. I guarantee you, 90% of plumbers are doing that. They don't call it the business meeting, or they don't have a formal name for it, but they're getting the guys together and saying, Pete's going there, Simon's going there, Sipo's going there, and when you're finished with that job, then please phone into the office because there's another urgent job if you can, if you can fit that in. We're doing that. We're doing that anyway. Or remember that you've got to go and pick up the material from the supplier, or whatever, all that type of thing. We do every plumbing business does that virtually every single day. So just add this element of where are we going? What are we trying to achieve? And what that does, keeps everybody on the same page. Because, sometimes people forget, life happens, things come up, and people tend to start drifting off a little bit, maybe to the left or to the right. And if you don't, on a daily basis, bring them back onto the path, before you know it, they off somewhere on another road. They completely forgot about the road that you planned and that you set at the beginning of the year, or, your 5-year strategy or your 10-year goals. So on a daily basis, just remind them, remember, guys, we are going to be the biggest and the best plumbing company in this area, or we're going to be the leaders of whatever, that reminder. And then, for yourself, is even when you're going to see your clients, or when you doing reviews with clients, or whatever it is that you're doing, just to remind yourself, because it's probably the business owner that's going to be doing this, is just to remind yourself that when I go into this meeting, what is it that I want to achieve? I worked for a boss many years ago, and every single meeting that we would set up, he would say to us, okay, you've got this meeting. What's your objective for the meeting? It used to drive me mad. It really drove me mad until the penny dropped with me, So what is it that why am I spending an hour? Why am I spending 2 hours meeting with this person? What is the objective of this meeting? And at the end of the meeting, we were always looking for, what do we do? What comes out of this? There must be an action point. There must something come out of it. And so for yourself is to, when you're meeting, particularly with big clients, is before the meeting is just to take a couple of minutes just to prep yourself and say to yourself, this is the agenda for the meeting, or this is the reason for the meeting. I want to achieve A, B, and C out of this meeting. And when you come away from the meeting, make sure that you're at least a step closer to achieving the goals that you wanted, and that you've got some action points out of it, so that it wasn't a wasted meeting. It wasn't just going there for a chat. You've got to come back out of it and say, right, we're going to take steps 1, 2, and 3, and that's going to again move us into the right direction. So planning is not just a once-off event. Again, I'm going to say this again. It's not just a once-off event. It's an ongoing thing, and you eventually you get to a point where you kind of live it, and it kind of comes naturally. But to start with, you've got to spend a little bit of energy and make sure that you're doing it.
Brendan, thanks a stack for having joined me in this conversation. I hope that it carries the same value to our viewers as it does for me. Thanks for your time and your effort.
Thanks, Willem. Great to be here, and best of luck for 2023 to all the plumbers out there. I think it's going to be a tough year, but I know that if you plan well, you're going to make a big success of it. Thanks a lot.
I'm going to say 2023 is going to be COVID-free. to our viewers and our listeners, please do stay tuned, because right after this, we'll bring you some industry announcements. On the 10th of March, the PIRB will be celebrating World Plumbing Day at their office in Centurion, Pretoria. Come and join us in celebrating World Plumbing Day and stand a chance to win some great prizes. Don't forget to save the date. Coming on Thursday, the 9th of February 2023, IOPSA will be hosting a plumbers evening in Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Western Cape, Free State and the Eastern Cape. For more information on any of IOPSA's Plumbers Evenings for 2023, visit IOPSA at www.iopsa.org. And lastly, don't forget that you can send your questions about the PIRB or the plumbing industry via email to communication@pirb.co.za or via WhatsApp at 079 833 6930. We intend to address as many of your burning questions in our show called On the Couch. Tune in to On the Couch to stay informed.